Under the cloud of U.S. tariffs and protectionism, China pledges to boost its economy and to continue opening up at the Boao Forum for Asia. Hello, I'm Mike Walter, sitting in for Anna Naidu, and this is The Heat. Foreign governments and car makers are reeling after U.S. President Donald Trump announced this week a 25% tariff on all cars coming into the United States. Now, it's the latest move in a litany of tariffs imposed by the United States on China, Canada, Mexico, and the European Union, and could have major consequences for the global economy. The Trump administration's trade policies are top of mind for government and business leaders attending the Boao Forum for Asia in southern China. On Thursday, Chinese Vice Premier Ding Xuexiang delivered a keynote speech calling for strengthening cooperation, fostering globalization, and safeguarding the free trade system. For its part, China will open up even further to foreign trade and investment. We begin our coverage with this report from Daikai in Boao, Heine province.
Addressing an audience of global leaders, business executives, and academics, Chinese Vice Premier Ding Xuexiang stressed the need for unity in an increasingly uncertain world.
High levels of mutual trust are essential for building a community with a shared future for Asia. We must uphold the values of peace, cooperation, inclusiveness, and integration, and stick to Asia's approach defined by respect, consensus building, and accommodating all parties' comfort levels.
Ding reaffirmed China's commitment to multilateralism, calling for the protection of a UN-centered international system and a rules-based global order that ensures fairness in global governance.
Economic globalization and open cooperation are the inevitable paths towards building a shared future for Asia. For decades, Asia has been one of the most dynamic and promising regions, and a key factor behind this success is its commitment to openness.
Ding emphasized the need to uphold free trade, reject protectionism, and leverage regional cooperation platforms of East Asia and the Asia-Pacific.
No matter how the external environment changes, China will open wider to the world. We warmly welcome businesses from all countries to invest in China, take part in its modernization, and share in its development opportunities.
Ding called for collective efforts to address global challenges and create a brighter future for both the region and the world. As the opening plenary takes place here, the stage is set for critical discussions on tackling some of the world's most pressing challenges. China's call for unity and shared development echoes its consistent vision, reinforcing the forum's mission to foster dialogue and cooperation in uncertain times. Daikai, CGTN, Boao.
For more on the Boao Forum, let's bring in our panel. Joining us from Boston is Jorge Heine. He's a former Chilean ambassador to China and research professor with the Pardee School of Global Studies at Boston University. Also with us from California, Gita Wurjawan is a former Indonesian Minister of Trade and currently a visiting scholar with the Precourt Institute for Energy at Stanford University. And from Beijing, John Gong, a professor at economics at the University of International Business and Economics. And John, why don't I begin with you? You know, we're seeing this escalation of this trade war. Again, yesterday, President Trump talking about more tariffs. Let's listen to what he had to say, and I want to get your reaction on the other side.
We're going to charge countries for doing business in our country and taking our jobs, taking our wealth, taking a lot of things that they've been taking over the years. They've taken so much out of our country. Friend and foe, and frankly, friend has been oftentimes much worse than foe. And this is very modest. And what we're going to be doing is a 25% tariff on all cars that are not made in the United States.
So, John, give me your reaction to what he had to say. And obviously, this is a pillar of economies in Asia. You think of Japan, South Korea. What kind of impact is this going to have?
Well, I think it's probably going to impact more those cars being built in Mexico. I think over the last 2 decades, quite a bit of manufacturers, including Japanese, Korean, and Americans, Ford, for example, have migrated some of their operations to Mexico. to certainly take advantage of the lower labor costs and costs of other things in Mexico, in Tijuana, in other areas south of I think it's Laredo of Texas, and I think this action from President Trump is not surprising to me at all. I mean, the bottom line is that he needs tariffs. The tariff has to come from somewhere. Because he's carrying out this grandiose social experiment to essentially shift some of the tax sources from income tax to the tariffs. So the money has to come from somewhere. Where it's going to come from? Well, it's going to come from some major trading partners, including China, Canada, Mexico, and Europe, and also from the most important products imported into the United States. And certainly, the cost is a big chunk of that. So I think the consequences of this is going to see massive price increases in the United States for cars. And I think cars are very different in the sense that people are very sensitive to this. They notice the car prices going up immediately. I mean, if you look at the average age of cars running on the streets in the United States, it's already getting very old. The cars are already getting very expensive. And also, to be frank, to be honest, that the cars in the United States are outdated in my view. When the rest is moving towards more of a electric cars in the United States, it's still what I call a ICE island. ICE meaning internal combustion engine. So you're going to see these overpriced cars, outdated cars very soon in the years to come. And that's actually very bad news for the United States. I think President Trump is making a gross mistake.
Well, John, to your point, there is all this complaint about the price of eggs in the United States. So the price of eggs is just too high, but people still go and buy eggs. It's not that much money. I was talking to a woman last night in her 30s. She was going to buy a car this year. She's like, I'm not going to buy a car. You can put off buying a car. It's a big ticket item. So that's kind of the downside of a move like this, isn't it?
Absolutely. America is running on cars. I can't imagine people carrying out their daily lives without cars. People have to go out buy cars. I mean, you can postpone buying the next car for a certain period of time, but you can't postpone it forever. I mean, the cars running on the streets, as I said, is already very old. And people have to buy cars, and they're going to figure out that it's going to be, $2,000, $3,000, $4,000 more expensive. And that really cuts into people's budget. I think, President Trump ran this campaign. He won this campaign on the promise of addressing inflation, right? And he said that, he won this election because people are concerned about prices at grocery stores and at the pump and gas stations. Now people are going to find out that the costs are, the prices going up at dealerships. You look at the daily monthly expenditures for average American household. The biggest item, of course, is on housing, and the next biggest item is on transportation, meaning on cars, and that's going to have a massive impact on inflation, in my view, and it's just very bad news for American people.
And joining the discussion now is Yan Liang. She's joining us. She's a chair professor of economics at Willamette University in Oregon. One of the things the Chinese Foreign Ministry is saying is the U.S. actions undermine the rules-based multilateral trading system. Are these actions kind of in violation of the World Trade Organization, do you believe?
Well, good to talk to you. I think so. I think the unilateralism that the Trump administration now is pushing forward, it's a clear indication that they are going to disrupt the current global order. So when it comes to, for example, Trump is imposing tariffs on China, on Mexico, and Canada, it's clear a violation of the reciprocal, trade rules. Not to mention when it comes to, the tariffs that are imposed on Mexico and Canada, it's a clear violation of the NAFTA or the Trump's new version of the USMCA that he himself penned back in 2020. And so I think all of these are just finding an excuse, I think, in some ways, to use tariff as a unilateral tool to make countries to make concession. In this case, Trump wants Mexico and Canada to do more about fentanyl crises in the United States or the border immigration sort of issues. But for China, I think it's clear that the 20% additional tariff, it's really trying to, in some ways, decouple from China in the sense that, Trump has been thinking that the Chinese production has been so competitive, it's taking away, quote unquote, right, the U.S.'s industries. But I think he's really not really paying attention to the U.S.'s own failed industrial policies and macroeconomic policies that are failed to really strengthen the U.S. economy. Now, the most recent rhetoric that he has is if China is willing to negotiate on TikTok, then there might be some back down on the tariff. But again, I think this is completely using tariff as an economic coercion to make countries to agree on things that he wants to demand on. So I think this is a clear violation of the kind of free and open trade agreements that are reached at the WTO, and it's really undermining the U.S.'s own credibility, not only in terms of for its so-called competitors, but also among its own allies.
Ambassador, on that point, allies, his comment, they've taken so much out of our country, friend and foe alike, frankly. Friend has been oftentimes much worse than foe. From a diplomatic standpoint, he's not making a lot of friends with these comments, is he?
Well, no doubt. People have been very surprised by the way Mr. Trump has handled its relations with Mexico and with Canada and also with Europe, by the way. Now, the basic point here I would also like to underline, it is not just importing cars from the rest of the world. Much of the automotive industry in North America is based on the notion that some parts are produced in Canada, some parts in the US, some parts in Mexico, and they go many times across the border. So the question is, will every time a part goes across the border, will pay 25%? I mean, if that were to happen, the whole automotive industry in the United States, or much of it, would collapse. So it's a real problem. It isn't just importing cars from Asia or from Europe. It's the very basis of the North American auto industry that would be in question as a result of this. So it's very problematic. The other thing that I don't quite understand either is if you want to build up the automotive industry in the United States, presumably you want to look forward and work with e-vehicles and e-mobility. Yet apparently that is not in the cards. So I find it all very confusing.
Gita, the United States isn't done. They say that they plan to announce reciprocal tariffs next week on every country that taxes U.S. products. According to Bloomberg Economics, Southeast Asia could be hit the hardest. What might this mean for Indonesia and its economy?
Well, Indonesia had a bit of a surplus with the U.S. from a trade standpoint, but I think the more exposed economy in Southeast Asia would be Vietnam, which had a disproportionately much higher trade surplus with the United States. And I think, Vietnam would be anticipating a much higher imposition of tariff as compared to some other Southeast Asian countries. But I don't foresee this as something that will sustain for a long time, given the fact that, we're witnessing three notable, observations with respect to Donald Trump. The first one is the obvious imposition of tariff. The second one is this deportation of undocumented workers. And the third is this perceived interventionism with respect to the Fed. All these, I think, will entail some sort of higher risk premium for anybody that wants to allocate capital to the United States. And this, I think, will present an opportunity for Southeast Asia in terms of being able to allow for some degree, if not a meaningful degree, of reshoring of manufacturing capabilities from China and other places to Southeast Asia, as long as Southeast Asia would be able to move up the needle in terms of its marginal productivity, so to somewhat match a little bit of what China has already attained. Secondly, the reason as to why the imposition of tariff might have to be recalibrated in the U.S. To the extent that it doesn't translate into a meaningful, concrete increase in productivity in the United States, it's a lose-lose proposition for the Donald Trump administration because the very objective of imposing this tariff on to goods and services that are coming to the U.S. would be for the U.S. to be able to produce, but production, has to be accompanied by a higher productivity, which I think will take a very long time for the U.S. Capabilities to be able to move up in terms of their marginal productivity, as to be able to match, particularly in the context of the EVs that the other panelists have alluded to, that are being made not just in China but in other places by Chinese companies. They're on a different planet, and I think it will take a while. And until such time, I think the markets within the U.S. and the administration will have to come to a realization that there needs to be a recalibration.
And John, it's so interesting because we have this message coming from the White House about tariffs, and then you look to Boao, and I mean, I just wrote down a couple of the quotes from our earlier package: shared future for Asia, a commitment to openness, China open wider to the world. I mean, it's different messaging altogether. Multilateralism taking center stage in Heine. Give us a sense of what we're seeing here.
Yeah, it's such a sharp contrast. But let me first, disagree a little bit with the ambassador has just said. I think Trump's policy is going to be lasting for a long time. If you look at history, Smolley's impact lasted for a long time, and I think President Trump's political base right now in the United States is still very strong. It's still widely popular, and I would speculate that at least this policy is going to last to the end of his administration, and it's quite likely that I think the Trump family or the Trump clan is going to continue the administration beyond 2028. And second, I think the issue about raising United States marginal productivity and reshoring and increasing the industrial base, these kind of issues, I think these are taking a backseat right now. For him, the first priority is regarding the fiscal side of things. He wants to balance the budget. He wants to increase revenues from the tariff side. So I think this policy is going to last for a long, long time to come. And this is a world that we have to live with for a long, long time. Now, back to your question about this contrast between what's happening in Boao and what's happening in Washington, D.C. I think we're facing a very different world right now. I mean, this report coming in, I think yesterday or today, that the United States has withdrawn the payments to the WTO. Essentially, the Trump administration is going to dispense with WTO. It doesn't matter anymore to Washington what's happening in the WTO. So I think the so-called rules-based international order is disintegrating. I mean, there's no rules-based order anymore. We're in a different world. Nevertheless, I think at least in Asia, we're having a peaceful environment. We're still having the massive trade, increasing trade. So I think hopefully, at least we are in a world that's partially open, partially with free trade, and China at least is committed to that part of the world. And I think over the long run, I would advise executives from companies in China that the trade between the United States and China is going to go away. I mean, the good thing, hopefully, is that we can manage this process smoothly, less disruptively, less destructively. And we have to rely on a different world where we still have free trade among our partners and other countries that we have a lot of trade with, particularly in Southeast Asia, in my view. And that's a vibrant world. It's the epicenter of the new economic order that has seen rapid population growth, rapid economic growth, and that's where the future lies with. So I think preparing for a world that's very, very different from today's world.
Well, Yang Liang, I want to get your thoughts on what he just said, and also this concept of a risk premium. Can this backfire on the United States and unite Asia in a sense?
Well, I think so. I think you already talked about the stark contrast where the U.S. is imposing, unilateralism, protectionism, again, pushing a lot of very not well thought out policies out there and create a lot of chaos and uncertainty, from slashing federal government programs to erecting trade barriers and so on and so forth. I think this is definitely not conducive to a healthy business environment and also for business long-term planning. Whereas I think in Asia, what we're seeing is, led by China, many of the countries are working together to build the kind of regional supply chain. And we know the Asian economies have been very vibrant and very dynamic. When you look at the R&D investment intensity in the region, when you look at the patent applications of the region, it's clearly that Asia is leading when it comes to industrial production, when it comes to technological innovations. When you look at the wide range, the applications of technologies like 5G, AI, big data, digital infrastructure, green economy, digital economy, I think Asia is really thriving. When you look at, for example, the PPP-based GDP, Asian economy accounted for 48.6% of the global GDP, and it's projected to grow at 4.5%. So what that means is Asia is going to contribute to half of the global growth in this year. So I think all of this just shows that the openness and the stable and peaceful environment that the region collectively foster, on top of all these regional integration, technological innovations, and supply chain formation within the region, are really going to go a long way to help share the development in the region. So I think this is very important, as we know that the intra-regional trade now almost, I think, reached 60%, and last year the intra-regional trade has gone up by 3%. So it's going to remain a very vibrant economic region, and will contribute to the global trading system, investment system, and also global growth. So I think there's a lot to be learned, I think, from the United States and elsewhere when it comes to this sort of Asian success story.
Yeah, Ambassador, Asia growing, the United States contracting. I mean, we heard the Chinese Vice Foreign Minister earlier this week saying global threats require global responses, highlighting the importance of multilateralism and also calling for safeguarding the United Nations. John's talking about these institutions, international institutions, where the United States appears ready to perhaps walk away from. Does the U.S. kind of risk isolating itself from the rest of the world? And what does the New World Order look like then?
Well, I think that's a great question. The danger is certainly there. There are very strong isolationist currents in the United States, and hand in hand with protectionism, with all the consequences that entails. But let me underscore one thing that it seems to me that hasn't been mentioned and that is very important in the case of Asia, and why it seems to me that offers a glimmer of hope in this very complex moment in which we are living of international disorder. And these are the various regional integration schemes that exist in Asia, like the RCEP, the CPTPP, that is a Trans-Pacific entity, and also DEPA, the Digital Economic Partnership. Those, it seems to me, are emblematic of the very different approach to trade, to international trade policy that is being followed in Asia. And it seems to me that looking for ways they can be extended to other parts of the world is very much the way forward. Chile has applied to join the RCEP, which is made up of 15 Asian and Asia Pacific countries. And that, it seems to me, is a step in the right direction. So would be extending and amplifying the CPTPP, which China has applied to join as well. So that in those institutions, it seems to me, lies very much the hope for Asia reaching out to Latin America and also to Africa to work in South-South cooperation and do away with these dangers of protectionism and isolationism that we are seeing.
And Gita, as he mentioned, international disorder, it's realigning configurations, new partnerships emerging. Indonesia announcing that it's going to join China's new development bank. How will membership for Indonesia kind of help with its development and energy transition? And are we going to see more of these kind of alignments, do you think, moving forward?
Absolutely. Just FYI, I was one of the early initiators of the RCEP in 2011. This was on the back of the belief that, our integration with China from a Southeast Asian standpoint would only reach far greater heights. 25 years ago, the trade between Southeast Asia with the U.S. would have been about 3 to 4 times that of Southeast Asia with China. But fast forward to today, it's nearly $1 trillion, whereas the trade between Southeast Asia and the U.S. is still at about $520 billion. So that train has left the station in terms of the integration between China and Southeast Asia. Now, in the context of what I think makes sense for Southeast Asia to interact with China, it would be in the area of both AI and energy transition. Now, in the context of energy transition, Southeast Asia is only powered to the extent of about 400,000 megawatts, right? And only certain countries have electrification of about 10,000 kilowatt hour per capita. To reach modernity, Southeast Asia, for all 10 countries, with the exception of Singapore and Brunei, of course, would have to build an additional terawatt. And this is something that I think the Chinese are capable of doing technologically, but also being able to provide at a cost-efficient manner, which I don't think the West has and will be in the near foreseeable future. So I do believe that for purposes of energy transition for Southeast Asia, inclusive of Southeast Asia's attaining modernity as to reach an electrification of at least 6,000 kilowatt hour per capita, as to build an additional terawatt, China is the natural partner. I think the natural technological capital allocator, and hopefully that will be accompanied by the economic capital allocation too.
And let me ask one follow-up question, and briefly, if you may, the Boao Forum, bringing together nearly 2,000 representatives from 60 countries. Is this forum even more important than it has been in years past?
I think so. Look, in a much more multipolar world, ironically, the world has become much more bilateralized, at best plurilateralized. And I do believe that a collaborative effort, amongst Asians and their true friends and partners around would be emblematic and characteristic of not just the near foreseeable future, but I think beyond.
Okay, we've got about 20 more seconds. One final question. What do you think is going to emerge after the forum wraps up in terms of a message?
Well, I think a new world order is in play, and I do believe that China will play a much more significant role with respect to regions such as Southeast Asia for both, I think, AI and energy transition. And people don't realize that, when you talk about AI, when you do a simple search on whether it's DeepSeek or ChatGPT 4.0, it requires about 10 to 15 times the amount of energy compared to a simple search on a simple search engine. When you try to generate a sophisticated AI-generated, type of image on like a platform like Sora, it's going to require about 10,000 times the amount of the energy. So it just amplifies the point that for you to be able to AI yourself to the hilt, you're going to have to accompany that narrative with the narrative of energy transition.
It's going to be interesting to watch. Thank you all. Great discussion. Really appreciate it. That's this edition of The Heat. I'm Mike Walter in Washington, D.C. Thank you for watching.